We've all been there. New year or new school year, new goals, new dreams, and yet somehow a few weeks later, we're right back to where we started. So what's going on and how do we break this cycle? Setting goals is easy, but actually achieving them, that can be really hard. I hope you stick around because today I'm going to show you the science behind actually achieving your goals, as well as 3 tried and true methods to accomplish what you set out to do this year. By the way, if you're new here, hello, my name is Francesca Cathit. I came first in my class. I got various academic medals, awards, and scholarships, and in today's video, you'll learn about motivation in science, boosting intrinsic drive, goal setting, and using your imagination to reach your goals. Sounds weird, but stick with me. We'll get nerdy, talk about neuroscience, and by the end, you'll hopefully have learned ways to transform your ability to reach your goals, if you apply them. Okay, so let's start with motivation, because achieving your goals this year is absolutely possible, but it might not be easy. For any goal, you need consistency. You don't become an elite basketball player by shooting 1 basket, or a chess grandmaster by playing 1 game, or a top student by studying for 1 hour. It takes consistency, and motivation makes it easier to stay consistent. Although, of course, habits and systems are absolutely crucial in order to sustain the effort required to meet those long-term goals. Science shows there's a type of motivator that's more powerful than top marks, praise, or acceptance letters to dream schools. Picture this. You're sitting at your desk, your to-do list glaring back at you. You were so enthusiastic last night when you told yourself you'd start first thing in the morning. You know you should work, but you feel like there's an invisible wall standing between you and what you know you need to do. The day goes on, the sun is starting to set, and you tell yourself you'll start soon, right after this episode. Before you know it, you're lost in distractions and find yourself doing a deep clean of your file drawer while that important task stays untouched. Procrastination strikes again. Now, there's nothing abnormal about you if you procrastinate because, well, good luck finding anyone who has never put anything off in their entire life. But if you want to stop holding yourself back and start reaching those goals, it might help you to learn this about motivation. Extrinsic versus intrinsic drivers. Here, I'll be leaning on information that I've found while deep diving into the research as well as through working with students. I'll also be leaning on Rian Doris, co-founder and CEO of Flow Research Collective, which conducts research on topics like flow state and motivation. So when it comes to motivation, there are essentially 2 major types, although it might not be what you think. This excerpt from a Harvard paper tells us that there are 2 main types of motivation. First, we've got approach motivation. This involves the release of a neurochemical, dopamine, that tells us that something that we should enjoy is about to happen. Then we've got avoidance motivation. This directs us away from a threatening or an unpleasant experience by releasing hormones that trigger a fight or flight response. Essentially, we are motivated to repeat experiences that feel pleasurable and avoid experiences that feel bad. Both types of motivation develop in childhood and are influenced by intrinsic or internal drivers as well as extrinsic or external feedback. Today's video will focus on this idea of intrinsic drivers and external feedback, which I'll refer to as motivators. It turns out that one type of motivator far outperforms the other as a fuel source. Most of us rely on the weaker of the 2. Extrinsic motivators, as the name suggests, come from the outside. So these are things like money, praise, and status. If this is your fuel source, you act for the sake of a reward that comes from the outside. Now, don't get me wrong, these things aren't bad inherently, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to attain these things, so long as you're not doing it in a totally corrupt way, of course. The main issue is that extrinsic fuel works for a while until it wanes. So the research tells us that while the support of positive extrinsic feedback is part of a healthy motivation system, it's not an effective driver of behavior over the long term. It's temporary. Now, intrinsic motivators come from inside. It comes from things like curiosity, interests and preferences, purpose, instincts, and mastery. Looking back at that Harvard paper excerpt, it shows that once their basic needs are met, young children are motivated intrinsically by exploration, active involvement in play, and achieving mastery or success in a task. So when you have intrinsic motivation, you do things for the sake of the task itself. For example, you might listen to or dance to a great song when no one's looking just to enjoy the music, not because there's some sort of a prize for dancing or listening to the music. This type of fuel is self-sustaining and long-lasting. Now, if we dig deeper into the science, this review article shows that experimental and field research guided by self-determination theory has found intrinsic motivation to predict enhanced learning, performance, creativity, optimal development, and psychological wellness. Now, it doesn't have to be one or the other, extrinsic versus intrinsic. Extrinsic feedback can get you started, but intrinsic drivers keep you going for the long term. Another way I like to think about this is payday versus passion. Extrinsic feedback is like getting a check on payday. You get a short-term reward, but it fades quickly until the next one. Intrinsic drivers are like passion or interest in your work. It sustains you daily, even long after the paycheck has been spent. So if you actually want to achieve your goals this year, one key point is to find ways to tap into these intrinsic motivators. Tip number 1 is asking yourself, what's the point? Finding the bigger meaning is one way to boost intrinsic drive. So say you're trying to achieve a certain grade in school, or maybe reach a certain fitness level, or accomplish any other goal. Some questions you can ask yourself are, why does this matter to you? Why should you care? And what's the point? For example, if your goal is to get better grades, don't focus solely on the grades themselves. Think about why those grades matter. Maybe you want to help people and save lives one day. So getting good grades allows you to get into a university program to do just that. If your goal is to save money, don't just think about the number in your bank account. Think about the freedom it'll give you to explore the world, for example, or to help your family, or maybe even start that business that lets you pursue those creative interests while also making other people happy. Every day, whether you opt to study on a Friday night instead of going to that party, eat at home instead of getting takeout, or say no to buying something that you really don't need, identify exactly how it links to your bigger meaning or purpose. By clearly linking your tasks to something that excites you or means a lot to you, it can become a lot easier to stay on track. So now that we've discussed motivation, the second tip is about goal setting. I'll specifically focus on breaking down your goal and tracking. Once you've decided on your goal, what you want to do is break it down into smaller chunks and then track your progress over time. This helps with motivation and consistency. So part 1 is about breaking down your goals. Imagine that your goal is to score an A+ overall in math, or maybe to score in the 99th percentile on the MCAT. Now, if you're just getting started, these goals can seem both daunting and ambiguous because they might seem pretty ambitious and you're not really sure about the exact steps to get there. So the key here is to take that larger goal and break it down into smaller, more concrete and achievable milestones. This gives you clear and realistic targets to work towards. Next, part 2 of this is that you'll want to create a realistic timeline to track your progress. When I say realistic, what I mean is a timeline that would be reasonable, but still puts you on pace to achieve that bigger goal in a decent amount of time. For example, maybe one of your milestone goals is to complete your homework or to study for 1 hour each night. By tracking your progress, you can assess how your progress is going and then make course corrections or adjustments as needed. In terms of tools, there are so many tools available that you can use to track your goals, from physical planners to printed trackers, goal tracking apps, or even spreadsheets, for example. I happen to use a combination of a spreadsheet as well as a notebook. Now, let's put this together with an example. Let's imagine your goal is to do 100 pull-ups. Crazy, I know. Before you do that, you probably want to start with 1 if you can't do 1 just yet, and then work your way up to 10, then 20, and so on. You then put these milestones on a timeline and track your progress to course correct and adjust as you went along. Now, tip number 3 is to use your imagination to combat something called delay discounting. So if you think about long-term goals, one of the reasons they're so tough to stick to is because they're so far away. Our brains are actually wired to prioritize short-term immediate rewards and instant gratification. That's why doom scrolling on social media or scarfing down buckets of cookies can be so addictive. We keep scrolling and coming back for seconds, even though it goes against what our goals are, and even though we know we'll probably feel anxious and sluggish afterwards. Now, the interesting part is there's a psychological phenomenon called delay discounting that may play a role, which according to this paper in Psychology and Neuroscience is the depreciation of the value of a reward related to the time that it takes to be released. Another way to say this is that goals feel less rewarding to work towards the longer term they are and the farther away they are. Now, this meta-analysis in the Journal of Experimental Psychology discussed many potential methods to help reduce this phenomenon. Episodic future thinking was found to be an effective method for reducing impulsive choice. Episodic future thinking is when you vividly imagine future events to shift focus away from some kind of an immediate reward so that you can focus on longer-term goals. Emily Balcetis did research about long-term goal pursuit, focusing on participants who wanted to save more money for the future. Now, this was based on a 2011 study. So the first group was asked to think about how future them would feel if they had more money saved up in their bank accounts. Then there was a second group. The second group was shown a photo of themselves, but it was edited to make them look 30 to 40 years older. What did they find? The second group, who looked at photos of themselves 30 to 40 years older, were much more likely to pursue and achieve their goals. It seems that tapping into the visual system is more emotionally activating and can translate to motivation today. And in case you're interested, there are filters on Instagram as well as other apps that can help you create these aged headshots if you want to give this a go. So what's next? If you're ready to take your goals to the next level, consider giving some of these tips a try. You might just find that it's exactly what you've been looking for. And if you want to reach that next level, you know that taking action is how you reach success. Check out my video on how to get ahead of 99% of people to learn how to take action to reach those goals. If you found this video video helpful, feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, and maybe even share it with one other person who could use a boost in their journey to success. Thanks so much for watching. I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Bye for now, but not forever.